Okay, thank you. So I'm going to give a quite different type of talk. I work at Arm these days, so I come from the business side. So I'm not going to talk about any sort of research we've been doing, any solutions we have. I'm just going to give a talk about the interesting challenges that we see and potentially some different applications for the types of technology that the mathematicians have been talking about over the last few days. Just a bit about me. I was an academic for many years, and in 2005 I spun out a company from Cambridge called Geomerics. Notice, no T, does get misspelled pretty much everywhere. We specialized in graphics technology for computer games. So we launched a product called Enlighten, which does real-time global illumination. It's been used in well over 50 titles now. And if any of you have played around with the Unity game engine, Enlighten is the lighting technology in Unity 5 in the new release. We're seeing some great stuff coming out of there. Geomerics was acquired by Arm in 2013. If you've not heard of Arm, they're a Cambridge company. They design the chips that go into pretty much all of the mobile phones and tablets on the planet. So when you're surreptitiously checking the email during the boring bits of my talk, that's an ARM processor you're using there. They also make GPUs, and they're on the Android devices. I think they've got the most popular GPU now, and it was the GPU division that was particularly interested in acquiring some high-end graphics technology. Since moving into ARM, I've spent some time getting the Geomerics team bedded in, but I'm now moving into a role in research to try and catalyze more collaborative research between ARM and universities in the UK. I think it's useful at events like this where you're bringing together technology and researchers and industry to have some idea of the type of industries we're talking about and why you might actually be interested in developing a technology there. There's not much point in developing a whole lot of research and developing technology and going into an industry that's dying or isn't going to go anywhere with it. So the games industry is huge. This slide is about 2 years old now, I think, actually. Estimated this year to be worth about $75 billion globally. Some sectors are growing very well, but the industry is changing around. If we kind of look at this slide, the mobile sector is growing massively. That's probably going to be about 20 billion this year. More and more people are playing games on their mobile devices. It's obviously a trend that ARM pay close attention to. The social one is probably dying now. Companies like Zynga are sort of on their knees. There's not much growth there. Pretty much all those games have moved on to mobile. Handhelds, not much action there. PC is still growing and will get a big kick when some of the new VR devices come out. And the console industry has really accelerated from these figures. This last year we've seen the launch of the PlayStation 4, which is the fastest selling console of all time. And Microsoft haven't been slouches either. The Xbox One is the second fastest selling console of all time. So we're actually seeing a huge growth in the console industry that caught a lot of analysts by surprise. A lot of people thought that everyone was going to go to mobile and consoles sort of wouldn't be a success, but that's not happened. They've both grown. So it's a good industry to be in. It's a very exciting industry. There's very rapid adoption of new technology as well. Now, the title of my talk was Photorealism, and the challenge of getting photorealism into real time. So the first thing we need to do is define our terms here. So what do we actually mean when we say photorealism? What we don't mean is it looks like a photo of the real world. What we always want our games to look like is to look like film, and film doesn't look like the real world. It's kind of hyper-real. It's much more exciting. Real-world photos are generally a bit dull. Film's exciting. We want games to look like films. We try to adopt as much film technology into games as we can and just see how much we can push through in real time. Now, in film, obviously when you go to conferences like SIGGRAPH, they might argue this, but I contend that in film you can pretty much achieve the look you want now. The CGI business is so complex and large, you can achieve any type of effect you want. You just throw enough computing power at it. The challenge in film is just reducing those costs now and reducing the authoring times down. But if you look at a sort of big blockbuster movie now, you don't look at it and see shonky special effects anymore. It's not like not like going back sort of 10, 15 years. So a lot of the real interest now is in the real-time effect, for both for driving down costs in movie, for creating animated content at lower price, for YouTube, for example, and for games. So top there is an image from Gravity, that's sort of state-of-the-art technology. The bottom is a real-time one from Unity. Yeah, you can see actually we're getting pretty close now. And I thought, I couldn't resist showing this video. So this is so you can get an idea of where we are now. This is a trailer for a title that's coming out later this year. It's been developed by our friends in Sweden, Stockholm, the DICE team at the Electronic Arts. Maybe there's some sound for this as well. So this has all been captured from their game engine. This is all real-time output. You have to be slightly careful when you see terms like in-engine footage. What that basically means is it's been captured in real time inside their game engine, but probably on a ridiculously powerful PC rig. So the final game won't hit quite this graphics quality, but it'll get pretty close. And you can look at it at times. This really is indistinguishable from film. Yeah, we're very, very close to photorealism here. There are other bits where I think we're slightly further away. Facial animation in particular remains quite a challenge at the moment. It's always been a problem in games. It's why most of the characters in games wear helmets. It's really, really hard work rendering faces. But the sort of the scenery, the lighting, one of the reasons I picked this game out is the lighting here is using our Enlighten engine, so we're integrated into the Frostbite engine. So we've been working quite carefully on this. We have to develop new technology to make the rocks look nicer and everything. And the other reason I want to show it is because if you haven't rushed out and bought a PlayStation 4 and Xbox One yet, this should probably make you.
Is it coming out?
It's coming out this Christmas. And you can, available for pre-order as well. So that's kind of the state of the art. And you agree, massive progress has been made over the last 10 years. So what drives all this? What's the technology behind this? So ultimately, it all comes down to this. It's that entire image is just pushing triangles and texture mapping them. Not much else going on there. It's the way all real-time graphics is done. Because on the graphics side, you've got hardware support for all the operations you need to do on triangles. Texture mapping, geometry operations for dicing up triangles, the rasterization, filtering, all these things are all accelerated in hardware. So the workflow in real time is get everything into triangles and then push it through onto graphics card. And that's actually been quite a challenge because that's a completely different workflow from film, where they don't like using triangles at all. They tend to prefer to use the sort of subdivision surfaces that Andrew talked about, where you've got better continuity. Triangles can be a pain in that sometimes if you're not careful you can see the edges, but there's good tricks for avoiding that now. The nice thing with triangles is that they're so hardware friendly, it's extremely fast. Now, having formulated your surface in terms of triangles, you've also got to work out what color everything is, and that all comes down to this equation up there, the rendering equation, where the light you see on the vector omega naught is given by the sum of the light that's emitted from the surface and this integral over the hemisphere of the incoming light, a cos theta factor from the power from the pointing vector projected onto the surface, and this thing on the left called the BRDF, the bidirectional reflectance distribution function. This is the rendering equation. It was actually first written down by this guy, Lambert. I thought it was worth putting a picture of him in the maths department. He's actually quite a phenomenal guy, and if any mathematician can recommend a biography of him, I'd love to read it. He was the first to prove that pi is irrational. He wrote down the rendering equation, he introduced the term albedo, did lots of work in photometry, and also one of my other interests in cosmology has been hyperbolic geometry, and he was one of the first people to work in that area as well. I'd love to find out more about him. This BRDF is a complicated four-dimensional function, so the input and output are normal vectors. There is lots of interesting research still to be done on efficient ways of representing those types of data structures, and also on the capture side. So one of the things I want to sort of talk about as I go along is pointing out areas of interest for mathematicians to try and sort of look at, and that's definitely one. Now, the big change over the last sort of 6 years, 5-6 years in computer graphics has been this move to what's called physically based shading or physically based rendering. It may seem sort of really trite and obvious, but actually if you build up your graphics pipeline trying to simulate physics, you get things that look more realistic. The problem is, real-world physics is really, really complicated to simulate, so you always have to decide where you're going to cut off. And what's happened in the lighting and shading side is we've got much more accurate physics models here. And that means there's an awful lot of maths behind these models as well. The microfacet theory enables us to actually model rough surfaces in ways that are fairly accurate now. And that gives us much more interesting models for how surfaces behave as light sources move around them. We finally built in things like reciprocity, though that's often ignored. Energy conservation, didn't used to have that in old type of lighting models, it's in there now. And a whole load of parameters that allow the artist to play around with the surface model and get nice, realistic effects. Now, this all comes back to the same sort of idea that you meet throughout the machine learning and the image recognition part of the course, parts of the lectures we've been talking about. What you're doing in data imaging is you're taking large data sets and finding ways to understand them in much more efficient ways, so whether it's PCA or some type of machine learning algorithm. What's often interesting is thinking about this the other way around. Once you've got those types of models, can you use them to drive content that is realistic, but by providing the right sort of sliders to the artist that they can actually play around with stuff in a fairly compact, sort of sensible framework that gives really high quality results. That's kind of the big challenge. I think a lot of the work that's being done to classify images and classify geometry will inform how you then present tools to artists that are then intuitive to use. So what this new models have brought us is now a sense of cohesion across the games industry, and that pretty much all game engines use the same parameters for material modeling now. And they basically come down to sort of 4 parameters. One for the base color, one for how metallic a surface is, or how shiny it is, one for how rough it is, and a small scale sort of cavity thing for small scale shadowing. This gives you an amazing range of materials to choose from. And when you layer these on top of each other, you can do absolutely stunning things. These are all completely CG generated surfaces. The actual underlying geometry is quite simple, and all of the detail is in the texturing that's been applied to the surface. There's multiple layers here with different colors, different roughness and smoothness parameters, different shininess parameters, and then the artist goes in and sketches in these displacement maps over the top, so you can see one surface come through another. Actually, generating this is still very time-consuming, very complicated, and this is just one tiny piece of a much larger model. But you can see the type of detail and quality we can get to. And because the models underneath this are all physically based, physically driven, that has a number of benefits. One of them is that they look real, but that's not always the goal, but they look real. But also they behave, because there's an underlying model, they behave in a sensible way, they're predictable, and that's the thing that artists really like. However, there's a huge number of challenges just in this area of real-time graphics that are we want more and more people to work on. There's problems in how you light geometry. Shadowing is still a problem. Getting really good shadows is a hard thing to do, particularly if your light sources are area lights or directional lights like the sun. And this is all a real, mobile is presenting a real challenge here as well. More and more people want to play their games on mobile devices, but the mobile devices are just not as powerful as a desktop PC. So you have to make some compromises. On the other hand, the hardware the mobile hardware does have some nice features, and you want to play nicely with them. That can mean rewriting a lot of algorithms. We want to understand light more accurately, sort of the way that architects understand it. We want to take advantage of some of the features of mobile hardware to do more of the calculations on the GPU directly without swapping in and out of memory. It's a slightly technical point, but every time you move data off chip, that consumes quite a lot of power. It's one of the most power-hungry operations on a mobile device. We're interested in algorithms now that keep the data local on the chip, which is much more computationally efficient. We'd like improved materials models. We actually want to get closer to where they are in film. And there's actually, Ross didn't put any up, those microfacet models, there's a lot of detailed, complicated maths there that if anyone's looking for an interesting area to sort of play around in, I'd certainly steer them towards the physically based shading literature. Lots of interesting problems there. We still don't have good models for things like subsurface scattering, and there's lots of work still to be done on real-time global illumination. Enlighten kind of solve part of the problem. It just does diffuse lighting, but you want to get specular effects and lots more interesting effects than that. Another really interesting problem for the type of sort of algorithms that you guys were looking at are volumetric effects. They're kind of quite well done in games, but we're still missing a lot of the control that we'd like. You can do sort of atmospheric effects. That top right image is from Battlefield 4, I think, and the middle one's from Grand Theft Auto. We can get these nice sort of atmospheric effects, and we know how color changes into the distance, that sort of thing. This one from Last of Us is some snow effect that's nice looking as well. But we don't really have the level of control that the artists would really like. We want to try want to use the same sort of techniques that are used in the film industry, and there you use smoke in all sorts of interesting ways for setting mood, for the way the light bounces off it. And we can't really capture that at the moment. We don't have good models for simulating how smoke behaves, though I think that is a really good area for the type of PCA type approaches where artists just want to be able to make some fairly large scale, sort of coarse drawings of how smoke should go, and we just want algorithms to fill in the detail afterwards. How it flows past physical objects, how it interacts with light, lots of scattering calculations. Again, quite hard to do, very hard to do in real time, but doable. And we'd like to add in more interesting effects like depth of field, motion blur, lens flare. If you want to look like the movies, you've got to have lots of lens flare in there, particularly if you're going to do a Star Wars type of film. And there's a whole raft of new challenges come from the hardware side as well. It's just the days where you can just come up with a new algorithm and present it to people and say, right, there's my check, kind of done now. We need algorithms that have been optimized for the CPU, GPU, that can run on heterogeneous environments. Not all algorithms out there are GPU friendly. Anything where you've got sort of scattered data reads not going to be very GPU friendly. The most efficient algorithms tend to be ones that can take advantage of heterogeneous environments. If you're running a mobile device, you're going to need to max out the CPU and the GPU the whole time. You've got some compute you can offload to the cloud, so you need to break up your algorithms into parts where you need the result instantly and parts where you can wait and deal with the latency of the cloud. Got different memory models. Consoles and mobile have shared memory models, which is really good. It's very good for gaming, whereas a desktop CPU, GPU has a discrete memory model. There's a discrete memory on the GPU and a PCI Express, so there's constraints that come from there. And the big driver for ARM, and actually I think this is going to be a big driver for a lot of research into algorithms over the next decade, is have you thought about power in the way you've written your algorithms? Have you optimized your algorithms to use the least power? This is going to become critical for research, for work in data centers, for sort of large-scale applications, and it's also critical for games that run on mobile. And it's a discipline that people are only beginning to think about now. Up until now, all we've ever cared about is frame rate and speed. But in the future, that's not going to be enough. You're going to have to be power-friendly as well. That means thinking about the memory model a lot. Is the memory in the right place, and so on. Another big challenge that we have now is frame rate. We're all very pleased with this generation of console hardware that we can now achieve 60 frames a second, 1080p, pretty much every game, which is great, looks fantastic. But unfortunately, that's no longer good enough because all the new VR technology wants at least 90 or ideally 120 frames a second. Otherwise, you start seeing some uncomfortable sort of tearing artifacts. That's a real challenge. Rendering out high quality at that sort of frame rate is difficult. And there's other problems. New graphics APIs are sort of being thrown at us almost on a monthly basis. We'd love to be able to program at a high level and have an intermediate representation that spits out optimized code for each of these graphics APIs, but we're years away from being able to do that. And the final thing I was going to talk about is content. So lots of interesting challenges in how you actually make graphics look good in real time. But an even bigger challenge is how do we create all this content. So this is the typical content pipeline for a game. Someone comes up with some concept art, like the image on the top. That's just sketch artists, people write using pencil and paper. And then you start the 3D modeling process. And that's when you start encountering tools like 3D Studio Max or Maya. But the trouble is those tools it takes you years to become good at creating 3D content. It's just a really hard thing to do. You then got to come out and texture these models, which you tend to do in different packages, in Photoshop typically, or from real-world photos and working with them. You then take all this geometry you've created and throw it into your game engine, which could be one you have in-house, or increasingly these days is Unreal or Unity. There you do more level design and work there, and that's where you finally apply the lighting and so on. And it's an important point, actually, that you do the lighting fairly late on. You don't have the lighting baked into the texturing. Otherwise, you start seeing that sort of effect we saw in Adrian's talk of characters being superimposed into a video where they don't belong. And the first thing that, if you've worked in the lighting industry for 10 years, the first thing that jumps out of you is they don't look like they're lit correctly. They don't live there. So you have to do the lighting late on because the lighting is a global effect and ties everything together. So 3D modeling is difficult. Often the packages work with polygons or other sorts of shapes, but ultimately we know we need triangle models. Not enough to author the geometry once. You typically have to author it 2 or 3 times for level of detail. There are some decent automated algorithms now, but they're not totally reliable. You've got to texture it, UV, unwrap it, and so on. Do all of this. It's a whole load of skills that are really, really hard to pick up. And games teams these days, if there are 405 people on the team, about 80% of them will be artists. There'll be a few programmers, a few other bits and pieces, but most people are artists creating content. And the big trend for the next few years is we're just going to want more and more 3D content wherever we go. Consoles and PC games, obviously, mobile games want much 3D content for there. Even a watch. If you're getting a latest smartwatch, you might even want to play a game there. It may sound ridiculous, but my son would gladly play a game on his watch if he had the opportunity. Want more 3D content for film, but the big new drivers are virtual reality and for VR and AR. In a VR world, Facebook have bought Oculus with the ambition that millions of people will be buying these devices and putting them on and consuming 3D content. The question is, where's all that content going to come from? Who's going to make it? What tools do we have for making it? And how do we get to the point where the users can make this type of content? It's a It's a big challenge, but there's a huge opportunity here for the right tools in the right hands. A big opportunity beyond games. Certainly, obviously, they've got their own VR platform for the PlayStation 4 that's coming out next year. I will certainly be getting one of them. It looks great. And Microsoft have got something slightly different. They've gone more down the augmented reality route with HoloLens. What I can say about that is my son is 10, he's nearly 11. He plays a lot of Minecraft. Up until now, he only knows Microsoft as the company that bought Minecraft. But I showed him the HoloLens video that Microsoft put on YouTube, and he turned to me and said, "Can you get me one of them?" So Microsoft have something there that makes them cool again with kids, which is really exciting. And actually, as soon as you see the applications for really good augmented reality, you can see how in 5-10 years' time that technology really will be everywhere. And there's loads of other stuff we want to do. Huge amounts of data. There's lots of research shows that being able to visualize this data in 3D is much more effective than 2D, and so on. So huge amounts of content, stuff to render. But how are we going to author all this content? This is the sort of final thing I want to talk about, the big challenge in many ways. We've got all these different devices we want to run 3D content on. Games, VR, AR, even for 3D printing. You'd love to be able, if you're out at a museum or something and you saw a sculpture, you'd love to be able to just wave your camera around it and go back and then print it off at home with a 3D printer. But the technology just doesn't exist yet. If you try to capture all this 3D content, you hit the problem that it's generally very expensive. You need some sort of specialist studios to set up to capture from all sorts of different angles. It's very hard to sort of bring this into the film scenario. These type of rigs are quite common now. If you want to sort of capture an actor in such a way that you can then put them into a genuine 3D experience, it's just really difficult to do. Hugely expensive. It's not something you could just do in your house. And it doesn't, even at the end of it, it doesn't produce models that are particularly game-friendly. So we need a lot more in space of advanced modeling tools. We need the sort of things that Andrew was talking about, of taking a 2D video and just popping out a 3D image, and the sort of stuff that Adrian's talking about as well, of creating these good 3D models from 2D data. But we also need tools that are very easy and intuitive to use. And actually, the games industry has been kind of pioneering this. That there's some very, very specialist tools in the games industry. There's a tool called SpeedTree. The company, all they do is they make trees. They make technology, make trees, it goes into games. Everybody uses them. Brilliant algorithm, very, very clever company. And you get quite a lot of this in the games industry. My company specializes entirely on bounce lighting, get these very tight areas of specialization. There's loads of opportunities for the right technology to sort of make an impact there. We started through Unity and tools like that to make it a lot easier for people to make games, but the authoring of 3D content has remained hard, except for the sort of one glorious exception, which is Minecraft. I can't actually think of another application that has made it so easy for users to create their own 3D content. Lots of people have tried. I know the people that make Little Big Planet were very, very keen that the next version of it should be entirely 3D so that people could author their own levels in 3D. But they gave up because it's so hard to present tools to people where you can create 3D content without them becoming as painful as sort of sitting down for 5 hours in front of Max and Maya. Minecraft's one of the few things that have actually got it right, in that people like doing it and people can create these incredibly complex models. Well, I think part of the future is we want to take that mindset and get it to the point where you can create the type of VR experiences that people really want to be in. So that sort of ease of use, but with the final image quality more like the Star Wars trailer that we saw. That's what people want to get to. I think there's lots of opportunities here for interesting algorithms, for interesting ways of analyzing real-world data and then spitting that back into a modeling tool that enables you to create good content. So that was all I was going to talk about. I'll just say one final thing. So I'm I'm heading up a new research activity in ARM for collaborative research. We're interested in collaborating with universities, companies, across a whole range of topics, particularly on the sort of stuff I was talking about today. So if you're interested in establishing a collaboration, wants to learn more about sort of the ARM platform, please contact me afterwards.
Thank you very much.
Okay.